First and foremost, call Allah Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. That's all honor and glory and praise to the Most High and His only begotten Son. Double honors to elders and apostles and bishops that labor daily to give us His truth. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect, to the sincere Akim that are risking their lives and freedoms to spread this truth in the four corners. Blessings and salutations to the Akwath that are doing their work behind the scenes supporting the ministry. This is your brother Ibad, Banyan, Zakar, Lord willing. This lesson will be edifying. So let me start off by sharing my screen. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So we start off the siege of Jerusalem, aka the conquest of Rome, right? I mean, because that's what these devils do, right? When you go back to who they are, Esau, Edom, right? The Edomites, there's nobody as profane as them. They are opportunists. They will throw you under the bus, trample you to get what they want, right? Just from their forefather, right? Esau that sold his birthright, right? So when we get these precepts, we see who these devils are. So we start off with the siege of Jerusalem, right? The Jewish-Roman War. So we start off reading, and it says, Siege of Jerusalem, 70 CE, Roman military blockade of Jerusalem during the first Jewish revolt, right? So when you study the writings of Josephus, right, and you see what he talks about as him being a historian and the Jewish revolt, we hear a Jewish revolt, right, but we never look that deep into it, okay? So we do know that it was prophesied that the second temple was going to be destroyed, right? Also, too, when he's talking about that Jewish revolt, when you go into the history, there's key players in this. One, and his name's going to come up, would be Florus. Florus was a leader of Rome who was instigating a war against the Jews. And how did he instigate them wars? By raising taxes, by putting hardships on our people, right? To where he would force our people in a corner to rebel. All right. So, and that wound up working because you had the first rebellion, which was the Sicarii. They kicked it off pretty much. Killed some Romans. Took over some land. Masada in particular. That's where they try to retire at and run to, but they want to gain slaughtered there. So we see a few things happening, right? Where it says right here, the Jewish revolt, which was kicked off with the Sicarii because Florus was the instigator of it. Okay, so let's continue reading. All right. We read, the first Jewish revolt, the fall of the city, marked effective conclusion for a 4-year campaign against the Jewish insurgency in Judea. The Romans destroyed much of the city, including the Second Temple. The majority of the information on the siege comes from the copious notes of the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus. So if you're new to that, I mean, you hear that name a lot, right? Antiquities of the Jews, War of the Jews, Flavius Josephus, but you have to dive into that. There's many great writings in there that you can't find in the scriptures, right? So when you go to Job 8 and 8, that says for us to search the ways of our ancestors, right? Meaning that we're going to go into the writings, to archaeology, to history, to find these things out. So Flavius Josephus is a great source of information to find all this, and on top of that too, you can find, what happened to the Maccabees after it was written in the Bible, right? The Laodicean War, right? Salome Alexandria, John Hyrcanus, Aristobulus, right? Alexander Jannaeus, just to name a few. You could find out what happened with the legacy of the Hasmonean dynasty, so that's just another source of information. But to get back to my point, bear with me real quick here. All right. So we go down and read just a little bit to get a summary, right? Okay, context. In 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey captured Jerusalem. The Romans ruled through a local client king and largely allowed free religious practice in Judea at times to divide between monotheistic and polytheistic religious views, right? So, monotheistic, right? Belief in one God, okay? Polytheism, a belief in more than one God, which was paganism, right? So, that was free religious practice, but who started tightening that up to where we were creating the bowl? That's when you read about Florus. Florus did that and imposed hard taxes on us, to where the Sicarii were the first ones to kick off that revolt, kill some of the Romans, and take some land, which is more familiar as Masada. That's how that was acquired. So keep reading, all right? This friction, combined with oppressive taxation and unwanted imperialism, culminated in 66 CE in the First Jewish Revolt. The revolt was successful at first. Jewish forces quickly expelled the Romans from Jerusalem, and a revolutionary government was formed that extended its influence into the surrounding area. In response, the Roman Emperor Nero sent the general Vespasian to meet Jewish forces, an endeavor that pushed the majority of the rebels into Jerusalem by the time Vespasian was proclaimed emperor in 69 CE, right? So this thing happened fast with Vespasian, right? 70 CE. He wasn't playing, okay? He was sent with reinforcements, and that Jewish revolt, keep in mind, that was because it said right here, this friction combined with oppressive taxation and unwanted imperialism culminated in 66 CE. So when you read and study the writings of Josephus, we see that oppressive move on our people and the taxation was kicked off with Florus. Florus was a key player in that, and we're going to touch down on that in a little bit, right? But Nero and Pompey could not extinguish the fire, the rebellion of our people, okay? So, let me see if I get a little bit more. Just real fast. All right, here we go. Now, we see how these devils work, okay? Through time and history, we see that many of our people were attacked during our feast days, right? From examples of the Maccabees, right? Where our people didn't fight back and died in innocency, where the Most High was a witness of that they didn't raise their hands to fight back on the Sabbath day, right? These devils pay attention. We're a peculiar people, right? That's what the scripture says. Sabbath days, feast days, you know, when we put the Most High God first, that's when they decide to attack us, okay? It's in them to do that. So we read in April 70 CE, about the time of the Passover, the Roman general Titus besieged Jerusalem. Since the action coincided with the Passover, the Romans allowed pilgrims to enter the city, but refused to let them leave, right? So they knew that they were going to come in and choke off the supplies, right? The more heads, the more wine, the more food, cut off the supplies, the faster they starve out. So this was strategized, okay? And we read, thus strategically depleting food and water supplies within Jerusalem. Within the walls, the zealots, militant anti-Roman party struggled with other Jewish factions that had emerged, which weakened the resistance even more. Josephus, a Jew who had commanded rebel forces but then defeated to the Rome cause, attempted to negotiate a settlement, but because he was not trusted by the Romans and was despised by the rebels, so the Sicarii looked at anybody that was getting along with the oppressor as a sympathizer, okay? And it reads, the talks went nowhere. The Romans encircled the city with a wall to cut off supplies to the city and completely thereby drive the Jews to starvation, right? Which was probably prophesies Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 51 to 53, roughly, right? Starving, nothing to eat but each other, okay? There was many rebellions, but Sakari would be one of the most prominent ones, okay? So they didn't want to negotiate with Flavius Josephus because they looked at him as a traitor. And Rome didn't really trust Flavius Josephus either. So it's just some things that we got to keep in mind, right? By August 70 CE, we read that the Romans had breached the final defenses and massacred much of the remaining population. They also destroyed the second temple, right? So they got what they wanted, okay? Lock it, bear with me for a second. All right. Let me get back to where I was, right? We're gonna get into this today. Let me see if I can find everything that I'm looking for. All right. Now, an overview, right? The Roman conquest of Jerusalem. The Second Temple fundamentally altered Judaism without central place of worship and the sacrificial system, right? There was a place where there was emphasized prayer, studying the Torah, community life. Everything revolved around our temple, right? You take our temple, you take our identity, right? Roman triumph. Rome celebrated its victory with a triumphal procession in Rome, displaying spoils from the temple, including menorah and parading Jewish captives, right? So that's what they do, right? Now let me get scriptures. You get this all day, right? They're prideful people, very prideful. You only gotta go too far to break that down, right? Okay. So see how these people are, right? The pride of the heart has this is Obadiah chapter, only one chapter 1, verse 3. The pride of thy heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the cleft of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence I will bring thee down, saith the Lord, right? So there's nobody as profane as Esau. He's prideful, he's delusional, okay? Ransacking our temple and taking out the spoils and parading, right? Just like America and the eagle, the left wing, the right wing, but then the same bird goes. It's a Roman thing, right? The House, the Senate, the bird on their flag, right? That's what they did. When they went to war, they would parade that eagle and they would defend that eagle, right? If you wanted to conquer the Rome, you would take that flag with the eagle on it. Okay. Historical accounts. The primary historical account of the siege comes from Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian who defected to the Roman side. His writings provide detailed, though sometimes biased, information about the events. So you have to chew the meat, spit up the bones, right? You back things up with the scriptures and you cross-reference your sources. So that's how we deal with that, right? When you're dealing with biased sources, etc., etc. Okay. Salakia. Getting over a cold. Raising the city, right? It was said too that Nero would set parts of the city ablaze and play the violin while that was done, which is what they called a lyre, right? During the Roman conquest of Jerusalem, raising the city. Following the fall of the temple, the Romans systematically destroyed much of Jerusalem. Tens of thousands of Jews were killed during the siege and subsequent conquest, right? Many of them were enslaved and taken to Rome or dispersed through the Roman Empire. Only a few towers of Herod's citadel and sections of the wall were left standing as a testament to the city's former strength, right? Everything was destroyed. The diaspora again, right? Egyptian captivity, diaspora, right? Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian Medes, Greek, Roman. Our people were always spread out, okay? Well, you know what the diasporas are, then you know the reason why Paul was traveling Christ and trying to bring our people back to the Most High God, right? Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom, that's a different story, okay? Excuse me. So, we see that the fall of the Second Temple was predicted, right? Let me see if I can find the scripture for that. Bear with me. Okay. Let's get my phone to work. All right, give me a second. All right, let's just go here. All right. Move my face. Okay. Where are we at? That. Okay. Boom. Oh. Can't remember if it was Acts. I did a lesson not too long ago having to do with okay. Okay. We know Yahushua said it, but someone else said it too. All right, and trying to find what that is. Recorded. Well, maybe we'll get that next time. I know I do have that. I do have that somewhere. All right, yeah, it was Agabus. There it goes. It was Agabus. All right. All right.
Cooking soul.
Okay. Okay. Acts 21 and 11 ESV. And coming to us, he took Paul's belt and bound his feet and hands and said, thus saith the Holy Spirit. And it says, thus says the Holy Spirit, this is how the Jews at Jerusalem will bind the man who owns his belt and deliver him to the hands of the Gentiles, right? So that bound represents our people, right? And having to do with the temple, what happened to Paul, okay? Right. When Agabus warns Paul the coming persecution he will face if he returns to Jerusalem, Luke writes. So there's a lot of prophecy that was talked about, some of it having to do with Agabus, okay? So that's a different story, not to make a left turn and go too far. It happened in my last video, so. Now, the Roman conquest, the destruction occurred during 70 CE, which what we covered, right, under Vespasian, right? So we see who this devil was, right? Not only did he conquer it, but he made, they made tributes to him. One would be called the Arch of Titus, which I made in my last study. So let's see if I could just find that one more time to dust this off. Excuse me. Okay. Here we go. All right, the Arch of Titus, okay? We see that it reads, the Arch of Titus, 1st century, honorific arch located Via Sacra, Rome, just southeast of the Roman Forum. It was constructed in 81 AD by Emperor Domitian shortly after the death of his brother Titus to commemorate Titus' official deification, right? The victory of Titus together with their father Vespasian, the Jewish rebellion in Judea, right? So when they won, they collected plunder, they collected spoils, they collected taxes, they got slaves, right? Everything was good for them, right? Through our people suffering. So that's what these devils do, okay? Keep that in mind. Now, let me get to my next point, all right? Let me see if I can find it here. Need to go to my books. All right. Yeah, where's my book list at? All right. So Flavius Josephus. So let's go to it. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay. Which might be right here, is it? Right. Oh God. I don't think this is it. Give me a second. Bear with me real quick. All right. All right. So. See if I can retrieve this real quick. Yeah, so we're gonna get into Flavius Josephus and his works, right? And find these tools real fast, or we can break this down, okay? Excuse me. All right. Okay. Beautiful. Excuse me, this is where we wanted to be, okay? Let me make sure I'm still sharing my screen good. All right. Boom. Okay. Boom. All right. Everything's looking good. All right. Oh, here we go. Shrink myself.
Cooking soul.
Okay. All right. Get back to where I was. All right. Time. What did I just do? All right. There we go. Now, where is myself at? All right. So let's get some of this. All right. Now we get to Flavius Josephus' writings, right? And give me a second here. Okay. And we're going to break this down. So we got to go to chapter 17. Okay. War of the Jews, book 1. War of the Jews, right? Go. Right. So we got to go to book 2. And we go to chapter, I believe, 17. Oh. See, bear with me for a second here. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. All right. Okay. Where did I go? All right. Okay. Well, I got rid of my face and I can't find it no more. So let's just let that be then. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, here we go. Bring my Safari back. Right. Okay. All right. So we go to chapter 17 after that little fiasco. All right. And we're going to read. All right. Now, we read about the rebellion, right? So another thing we got to keep in mind is who kicked off this rebellion, right? Let me see here. FaceTime HD camera. Okay. Zoom. Oh, there I go. There I go. I found my face. All right. Excuse me. All right. So let's read this and let's get some of this. Okay. Now it reads. How the war of the Jews with the Romans began concerning Menahem. And who was Menahem? Right? This right here, Menahem. Keep that name in mind. Menahem, right? That was the leader of the Sicarii. That's who Menahem was. Okay? So it reads. This advice the people hearkened to, and went up to the temple with the king and Bernice, and began to rebuild cloisters. The rulers, also the senators, divided themselves into the villages and collected the tributes as soon as they got together 40 talents, which was a sum that was deficient. Okay, and thus did Agrippa put a stop to that war that was threatening. All right, so we had the people on the verge of war. Agrippa was trying to stop it. The clusters in the courtyard, that might have been like vineyards that might have been intertwined, connecting to each other, right? Excuse me. It reads, moreover, he attempted to persuade the multitude to obey Florus, right? Now, Florus was the name that we mentioned. That was a key player, right? Florus, okay? We'll get that right now. Who was Florus? Pay attention to that, because we see that there was an uprising, right? But there was a reason why there was an uprising before 70 CE. The reason why there was a Sicarii, right? The reason why they got Masada, okay? Excuse me. Florus. So let's get another page open real quick, right? And let's see who Florus was. Okay. Oh. Okay, Florus. All right. Let's see what that is. Okay. All right, let me see here. Florus. All right, we'll do this.
Good job, cooking.
Okay. Not quite. Let me see here. Florus text on the Jews. Okay. Florus. There we go. It's hard to find these things sometimes, right? So, biography, okay? Florus was Florus was appointed to replace Lucius Albinus as procurator and the emperor of Nero due to his wife Cleopatra's friendship with Nero's wife, Poppaea. He was noted for his antagonism towards the Jewish population and is credited by Josephus as being the primary cause of the first Jewish-Roman War. So, like what I said, all this was the kickoff of Florus, right? Florus, then you had Menahem from the Sicarii, the leader. He was not putting up with it, okay? Excuse me, that's what we need to keep in mind. Now, how did I get my picture back? All right, let's see. Oh, there I go. So keep in mind, we have key players, right? We have Menahem from the Sicarii. Then we have what we read about, which would be Florus, right? Florus. Where was that at? Okay. Right here, Florus, where Agrippa is trying to attempt to persuade the multitude to obey Florus, right? Because he's trying to keep peace, okay? So, Florus. Let's read about Florus. It reads, a Roman procurator of Judea from 64 to 66 CE played a significant role in escalating tensions between the Jews and the Romans, ultimately leading to the Jewish revolt. His oppressive policies, heavy taxation, and disrespectful actions towards the Jewish customs aggravated the local population, right? And the Sicarii was not having it, right? Which Sicarii in particular, Menahem, right? It kicked off the first revolt. So we know about the Jewish revolt. We hear about that all the time, right? We know about Titus Vespasian 70 CE, right? We know about Nero and Pompey couldn't see the Jews and they were losing battles, right? But all this was a boiling point. Heavy taxation, oppression, and disrespect towards our law, statutes, and commandments, right? Kicked off by who? Kicked off by Florus. Now, excuse me. We read also too about Agrippa's trying to keep the peace. Excuse me. Agrippa's speech, and it reads, have pity therefore, if not your children and wives, yet upon this metropolis and its sacred walls, spare the temple and preserve the holy house with its holy furniture for yourselves, for the Romans get you under the power. They will no longer abstain from them when their former abstinence shall have been so ungratefully requited. I call to witness your sanctuary in the holy angels of God, and this country common to us all, that I have not kept back anything that is for your preservation. And if you will follow the advice which I ought to do, you will have peace, which will be common to you and to me. And if you indulge for passions, you will run those hazards which I shall be free from. So we know that our people aren't playing this, right? Just like First Maccabees, right? That our people were given a license to do evil against our own people, right? We weren't having this, okay? Now Agrippa continues to say, both he and when Agrippa had spoken this, both he and his sister wept, for their tears repressed a great deal of violence of the people, but still they cried out that they would not fight against the Romans, but against Florus on account of what they had suffered by his means. To which Agrippa replied that what they had already done was like such a make war against the Romans, for you have not paid tribute which is due to Caesar, and you have cut off the cloisters of the temple from joining the tower and Ontania. You will therefore prevent any occasions of revolt if you will but join these together again, and if you will but pay your tribute, right? So sell out, bow down to this man, the one that's oppressing you, taxing you, and taking away your law, statutes, commandments, disrespecting your God, disrespecting your customs, right? But our people, they were not having it, okay? That's one thing that we have to keep in mind. Slovakia, okay? All right, so it's a little bit of background, right? Having to do with Florus, a little bit of background having to do with Agrippa and our people, okay? So we move on, continue to read, right? And we get to, excuse me. All right. We got to Agrippa's speech, right? Trying to bring peace, but our people weren't having it, right? Chapter 15. All right, so we're reading about Florus right here, okay? So the speech that we read about, right? We go right here, go back one, okay? If they'll do it. All right, 16. All right. And it reads right here. However, Florus contrived another way to oblige the Jews to begin the war and sent to Cestius, and accused Jews falsely of revolting from the Roman government, right? So this man had war in his heart, right? Our people were fed up, and then Agrippa made that speech, right? That we should have peace with them, right? And you see that towards the end of chapter 16, right? Like what we just went over, it says, to which Agrippa replied that what they had already done was such as make war against the Romans, right? So Agrippa was trying to talk us out of it, right? But and recommending us to pay tribute to Florus, which we weren't not having. Okay, so we'll continue and go on to 16, right? The Jewish revolt. Florus instigated it, and the Sicarii kicked it off. Menahem, the leader of the Sicarii in particular, right? So, moving on. Excuse me. Moving on. Okay. All right. And got a bunch of stuff on here, man. 1 to 2. All right. All right. So, that we should obey Florus, the multitude to obey Florus until Caesar should send one to succeed him, but they were hereby more provoked and cast reproaches upon the king, right? And got him excluded out of the city. Nay, some of the seditious had the impudence to throw stones at him. So when the king saw that the violence of those that were innovations was not to be restrained, and being very angry at the contumelies he had received, he sent their rulers together with their men of power to Florus, to Caesarea, that he might appoint whom he thought fit to collect the tribute in the country while he retired in his own kingdom, right? So this don't even really concern him. He ain't really doing nothing about it, okay? Now, we see in Flavius Josephus, right? The War of the Jews, book 2, chapter 17, right? And we go to the second chapter, and that reads, at this time, it was that some of those that principally excited the people to go to war made an assault upon a certain fortress called Masada, right? And that's how the Sicarii acquired this land at the Battle of Masada when they lost against the Romans, right? They ran to the land that they won, that they took over, right? And we continue to read. They took it by treachery and slew the Romans that were there, and put others of their own party to keep it. At the same time, Eleazar, the son of Ananias, right? And that's the Sicarii, the high priest, a very bold youth, who was at that time governor of the temple, persuaded those that officiated in the divine service to receive no gift of sacrifice for any foreigner, right? So we're putting it down, getting our law, statutes, and customs back. And this was the true beginning of our war with the Romans, for they rejected the sacrifice of Caesar on this account. And when many of the high priests and principal men besought them not to omit the sacrifice, which it was customary for them to offer their princes, they would not be prevailed upon. These relied much upon the multitude, for the most flourishing part of the innovators assisted them, but they had the chief regard to Eleazar, the governor of the temple, right? He was not having it. Okay. Excuse me. So continuing on, right? I'm gonna skim down a little bit and go to chapter 3. Excuse me, verse 3. All right. So we skimmed down a little bit. They showed, where's that? All right. Inner gate. At the first place, they showed great indignation. At a temple. All right, here we go. All right, so we read right here. And in the first place, they showed the great indignation they had at this attempt for revolt and for bringing so great a war upon their country, after which they computed their pretense as unjustifiable, right? Now, we get the key players again, right? We have, Florus, we have him and his oppression and his taxes, which kicked off the first Jewish revolt, leading to the work of Titus Vespasian in 70 AD and the destruction of our temple, right? So this was instigated, right, by Florus, oppression, taxes, and the first revolt by the Sicarii and Menahem, okay? Now, we continue to read, right here. And this is going to give us a little bit more of a picture, right? All right, and this reads, all right, that they did now irritate the Romans to take arms against them and invited them to make war upon them, right? So by them doing this revolt was an invitation for the Romans to make war against us, right? Once again, you know, it was instigated and everything plays out to the hand of the Most High. Our people kicked it off, the first revolution with the Sicarii and Menahem. Menahem against Florus, pretty much, right? Now, moving on, right? Like what I said, when you read about the destruction of the Second Temple, we know about that all day, right? Christ mentioned it many times, right? Agabus mentioned it, right? And I believe that happened not too far after his death, that came to pass, right? Then we see the works of Flavius Josephus that paints a picture of what happened, right? You get in depth, right? Florus, right? Oppression and taxes and the revolt of our people, okay? The Sicarii and Menahem. Excuse me. So, going down a little bit more, we're just going to get the nuggets in this, right? And it reads, seized on, okay? Now, upon this, the men of power with the high priest and also the part of the multitude were desirous of peace, took courage and seized upon the upper city, Mount Sion. For the seditious part of the lower city had a temple in their power, so they made use of stones and slings perpetually against one another and threw darts continually on both sides. And sometimes it happened that they made incursions by troops and fought it out hand to hand, while the seditious were superior in boldness, but the king's soldiers in skill. All right, they had the heart, but not the skill. These last strove chiefly to gain the temple and drive out those out of it who profaned it, as did the seditious with Eleazar, besides what they had already labored to gain the upper city. Thus were the perpetual slaughters on both sides for 7 days' time. But neither side would yield up to the parts they had seized on. So this kept going on and on, right? So we'll continue to read. Excuse me. I'm getting better slowly but surely, right? All right, here we go, verse 6. Now, the next day was the festival of Xylophori, and that would be in Nehemiah chapter 13, believe verse 31 is having to do with burning wood. That's what that Xylophori is, okay? So, we continue to read, right? Let me see my notes here. Xylophori, yeah. That's Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 31. If you want to know what that is, it has to do with a perpetual fire where they kept feeding it with the wood. Okay, Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 31. All right, you know what? Let's just go there. Let's just go there real quick. Okay.
Asina di sua maneira
list.
a celebrar fiesta tradicional.
We were at Old Testament. I think it's the last chapter. Yeah. Okay. There you go. So you go to the last verse, I believe it is. Okay. Come up a little bit. All right, here it goes. G&T version. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 31. And I provided for the wood offering at appointed times for the first fruits. Remember me, oh my God, for good. So that's what it was, like a perpetual fire, right? So we get back to where we were. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Chapter 6, or verse 6. Now the next day was a festival of the Xylophori, which we just read about, Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 31, upon which a custom was for everyone to bring wood for the altar, that there might never be a want of fuel of the fire, which was unquenchable and always burning. Upon that day, they excluded the opposite party from the observation of this part of the religion. So they were cleaning house, right? And when they had joined themselves to many of the Sakari, who crowded in among the weaker people, so they blended, right? Kept them knives in their cloaks, right? That was the name for such robbers as had under their bosoms swords called the Sakai. They grew bolder and carried their undertaking further, and so much that the king's soldiers were overpowered by the multitude and boldness, and so they gave way and were driven out of the upper city by force. The others then set fire to the house of Ananias the high priest and to the places of Agrippa and Bernice, after which they carried the fire to the place where the archives were repositioned and made haste to burn the contracts belonging to their creditors, right? That's had to do with that oppression, taxes, all that stuff, and thereby to dissolve the oblations for paying their debts. All this was done in order to gain the multitude of those who have been debtors, and that they might persuade the poorer sort to join their insurrection with safety against the more wealthy. So the keepers of the records fled away, and the rest set fire to them. And when they had thus burnt down the nerves of the city, they fell upon their enemies. At the time, the men of the power and the high priest went to their vaults underground and concealed themselves, while others fled with the king's soldiers to the upper palace, shut the gates immediately. Among them were Ananias the high priest and the ambassadors that sent to Agrippa. And now the seditious were contained with the victory they had gotten and the buildings they had burnt down, and proceeded no further, right? So we read about that rebellion, right? The insurrection, our people putting it down, our people heavily taxed, burning up the records, their debts, all that stuff, right? So all this was created by, instigated by Florus, right? For our people to go to war. He wanted a war and he got a war, right? But he couldn't do nothing with the Sakari. It was Pompey couldn't do anything, Nero couldn't do anything. Florus was contemporary during that time of Nero, to where Titus Vespasian had to come and put it all down, right? Now, We skimming a little bit further. We read verse 8, and it reads, as soon as I can find it. All right, the siege. Where are you at? 7. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, this is really nice how they do this stuff, right? Where is 8? I need 8. All right, here we go. Here we go. All right. All right. These they want proper instruments. All right. All right. So we're gonna read this right here. In the meantime, one Menahem. Oh man, we're not ignorant of Satan's devices. All right. 8. All right. And it reads, in the meantime, one Menahem and the son of Judas that was called Galilean, right? And that's who he was a son of, was a very cunning sophister and formerly reproached the Jews under Cyrenius that after Yahweh they were subject to the Romans, took some of the men of note with him and retired to Masada, where broke open King Herod's armory and gave arms not only to his own people but to the robbers also. These he made use of for a guard and returned in the state of the king of Jerusalem. He became the leader of the sedition and gave orders for the continuing of the siege, but they wanted proper instruments and was not practicable to undermine the wall because the darts came down upon them from above. So they were under attack, right? So that's what we read about Menahem. He's the one that's kicking this off. He's a leader, right? And we see that, that Menahem was the one that was kicking off the war against the Romans, right? So, you know, then we continue to read and see that Titus Vespasian destroyed the second temple, right? There during the conquest of Rome, right? Taking spoils and plunder, all that stuff, enslaving our people, right? So let me get a little further, right? All right. We're gonna go to almost 10. All right. All right, here we go. Take it from right here, right? So we're skimming through some of this and getting some insight on everything that happened, okay? All right. But Eleazar and his party fell violently upon him, and did also the rest of the people, and taking up stones to attack him withal. All right, so let's get a little bit further up, right? All right. All right, so we get this a little farther up, okay? And it reads, well, the next day the high priest was caught, where he had concealed himself in an aqueduct. He was slain, together with Hezekiah his brother, by the robbers. Hereupon the seditious besieged the towers, right? So a lot of things happened when there was during this first revolt, okay? A lot of people were killed and kept them guarded lest anyone of the soldiers should escape. Now the overthrow of the places of strength and the death of the high priest Ananias, so puffed up Menahem that he became barbarously cruel. And as he thought he had no antagonist to dispute the management of affairs with him, he was no better than an insupportable tyrant, right? So when you read Josephus' writings, you do know that he was a little bit biased, right? So can there be some truth into this? Yeah, there can be. Okay, then we continue to read. But Eleazar and his party, when his words passed down between them, how it was not proper when they revolted from the Romans out of the desire of liberty to betray that liberty to any of their own people and to bear a lord who he should be guilty of no violence was yet meaner than themselves, as also in the case they were obliged to set one over the public affairs. It was fitter they should give that privilege to anyone rather than to him. They made an assault upon him in the temple, for he went up thither to worship in a pompous manner and adorned with royal garments and had followers with him in their armor. Okay. So we see some of our people doing this today, having those same spirits, right? And it continues to read. But Eleazar and his party fell violently upon him and did the rest of the people, right? And the scripture says, a house divided against itself will fall. But all this plays out to the plan of the Most High, right? To give our people strength and faith, right? But it's not going to be our own hands that save us, okay? Everything was written aforetime for our learning. Continue to read that if were once ruined, the entire sedition would fall to the ground. Now Menahem and his party made resistance for a while, but when they perceived that the whole multitude were falling upon them, they fled, which way everyone was able. Those that were caught were slain, and those that hid themselves were searched for. A few there were of them that privately escaped to Masada, among whom was Eleazar the son of Jairus, who was akin to Menahem, and acted the part of a tyrant at Masada afterward. For Menahem himself, he ran away to a place called Ophla, and there lay skulking in private. But they took him alive and drew him out before them all. Then then tortured him with many sorts of torments, and after all slew him, as they did by those that were captains under him, particularly the principal instrument of his tyranny, whose name was Absalom. Man, gets crazy, man. I'm telling you, right? I'm telling you. So we see that the Roman conquest had to do with destroying our second temple, right? Our second temple was destroyed because of a revolt, and that revolt was created by Florus, which was the instigator, and Menahem, the leader of the Sicarii, which wound up being a tyrant, right? So this is just some bits and pieces of the Roman conquest, right? Because they are the vagabond of the earth. But when we're dealing with our people, that's what we're going to hone in on, right? Not only that they defeated our people, but they also defeated the Seleucid Empire, right? Amongst many others. Okay. Excuse me. Bear with me for a second. Now, the Romans defeated the Seleucid Empire from 192 to 188 BC, right? So that's what they do. The conquest Romans, they conquer, right? When they lose their resources also too, then they go and they pillage, right? I was watching Gladiator 2, and before they went to war, this man said that they have no land, that the only land they have, that it is stolen. That was a good point that he made at the beginning of the movie. And that's true with these devils right here, right? They're evil. It's in them. There's no good. There's no, they're corrupt fornicators, right? There's no uprightness in them, right? They want, they take. And when they have fake truces and peace, then they have a wicked root that instigates things to kick off a war. And how they do that by oppression and hard taxes, where it's unbearable. That what Florus did, that kicked off the first revolt with the Sicarii led by Menahem. Then he was a tyrant to his own people, right? Then we had the Battle of Masada, which was the Sakari's last stand that followed after the destruction of the Second Temple. And Lord willing, this was edifying. This is your brother Bob Wanyan Zakar from Nation Fresno. And with that, I am out.